Главное вот эта броня, короче.
Nearly 2 years after Yevgeny Prigozhin died, an account has been published of a tense meeting with Vladimir Putin in which the Wagner Group leader rejected subordination to the Russian Ministry of Defense. "Zhenya, you're fucking nuts," Putin is said to have told him. The Russian journalist and war blogger Anastasia Kashevarova, who was an outspoken supporter of the Wagner Group and is writing a book on its rise and fall, has described what happened when Putin and Prigozhin met on 29th of June, 5 days after the Wagner rebellion was called off. According to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, a 3-hour gathering of 35 people, including Putin and Prigozhin, met at the Kremlin. The Wagnerites assured Putin that they would continue to fight for him in Ukraine. Peskov says that Putin gave his assessment of the 24th June events, listened to the commanders' explanations, and offered options for their employment and combat roles. It hasn't been disclosed until now what these options were. According to Kashevarova, they were an ultimatum to Wagner to subordinate itself to the Russian Ministry of Defense, given that the Russian government was already fully funding Wagner. Kashevarova writes, "They say that the head of state was twitching, he even swore, but his presentation was factual and literate. The president's monologue was harsh, like a man. I was even told that the president directly said to Prigozhin, 'Zhenya, you're fucking nuts.'" At the meeting, the president cited the figures for the cash flow that went to Wagner. Wagner was supported by the state. The figures are large, but Prigozhin still created a combat-ready unit, even though he was withdrawing money. For example, according to the documents, the death benefits were more than 5 million rubles. But that's how much they paid in the Wagner Group. No one knew the details of the financial agreements. In the conversation, Putin proposed the option of preserving Wagner, but the money would go through government agencies. That is, it would be visible where and what was spent. An option was proposed according to which the Chechen Akhmat Spetsnaz is currently working, as a division of the Ministry of Defense, but with some subjectivity. All the commanders agreed, but Prigozhin said, "This does not suit us." Kashevarova says that this effectively sealed Wagner's fate, and that of Prigozhin himself. She suggests that he rejected Putin's option because then he was losing power over Wagner, and therefore his figure was no longer so significant. Yes, Yevgeny Viktorovich would have retained his business, but with no military power. She compares Prigozhin to Toranaga, the central figure of James Clavell's Shogun, a military leader who wants to unite disunited Japan, and he does not need anything else. This is what Prigozhin dreamed of. Defending the motherland, his only goal was more power. He created the strongest army, first-class fighters. They had a code of honor. The whole story about business is not about them. But his story is exactly about this: money, strength, and power. Many have burned on this path. How many more will burn? But he managed to create a professional army, and then he ruined it himself. Russian stormtroopers carrying out a luxury assault, using a Porsche Cayenne from 115,000 euros to 200,000 euros new as an assault vehicle. While this vehicle is almost certainly stolen, it once again highlights Russia's lack of armored vehicles. They are relying more and more on civilian transport at the front. It's a clear sign of the systematic degradation of the Russian armed forces since the start of the invasion. The Sting group of Ukraine's Ballista Special Unit has struck Russian logistics in the Kursk direction, targeting and hitting multiple vehicles, including 3 vans, a minibus, a Ural Tiger military vehicle, a truck, and 2 passenger cars. Striking Russian logistics isn't just tactical, it's strategic. Every destroyed supply truck, fuel depot, or ammo dump directly slows down their frontline operations. Without fuel, tanks don't move. Without shells, artillery goes silent. Logistics are the backbone of any army, and Russia's is stretched thin. By hitting their supply lines deep behind the front, Ukraine forces Russia to fight hungry, low on ammo, and constantly scrambling. It's not about chasing soldiers. It's about crippling the machine that keeps them moving. Meanwhile, communist fanaticism in Russia continues. On Red Square, the Communist Party holds a ceremony to induct children as pioneers, glorifying the so-called special military operation as a fight against neo-fascism. These are Trump's new buddies. The Pope spoke about Ukraine. War-weary Ukraine awaits a long and just peace, said Pope Leo XIV during his inauguration ceremony, calling for peace talks. After meeting with Pope Leo XIV, President Zelensky thanked the Vatican for its willingness to serve as a platform for direct talks between Ukraine and Russia. We're open to dialogue in any format, as long as it delivers real results. We value the Vatican's support and clear stance for a just peace, Zelensky said. Russian propagandists believe that sanctions against Russia are an act of war, and that missile strikes should be launched in response against the countries that impose them. In reality, sanctions against Russia have been in place for many years. They are working, but they need to be strengthened.
I believe they just need to understand as soon as when they say we will confiscate everything, we immediately strike the oil refining. We cause them damage to all the main European locations worth 300 billion. If they are ready, because de facto, well, the theft of our national resources, yes, monetary, this is an act of war. That is, there should be no illusions. They should clearly know. As soon as they say we are confiscating, we will immediately say, so people have time to leave, we will strike here, here, and here. The entire port infrastructure responsible for the supply of hydrocarbons will be destroyed. Moreover, it is quite compactly located, just to avoid any illusions.
For Germany to understand, if they yelp, they get slapped in the face, a Nazi face. Bam, next! If the French yelp, they get slapped in the face. Bam!
Ukraine is already using Australian M1A1 Abrams tanks on the front line. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky announced this during a meeting with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. The president thanked the Australian leader for supporting Ukraine and emphasized that the Abrams tanks are already helping Ukrainian soldiers defend the country. They also discussed further support for Ukraine and the participation of the Australian military in the coalition of the willing. Thank you for the comprehensive support from Australia, for the Abrams tanks that are helping our soldiers defend Ukraine. It's good that we have allies from different continents, emphasized President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky. Overall, Australia has announced the transfer of 49 M1A1 AMSA tanks to Ukraine, which had been used by the country's army from 2007 to 2024 as part of 2 armored regiments. Although the Australian government approved the transfer of these tanks, the process was somewhat delayed, according to Australian media, due to the suspension of U.S. military aid to Ukraine in March 2025 and the subsequent halt of operations at the logistics hub in Poland. In addition, the representatives of the Australian Department of Defense also partly blamed the United States for the delay, as the formal approval that the U.S. must provide before Abrams tanks can be transferred to another country had not been granted. It should be noted that before being shipped, the tanks of this type must undergo light repairs and the removal of systems considered classified by the Australian Army. As of March 2025, the vehicles were still undergoing the dismantling of systems used exclusively by the Australian military. The transfer of an additional 49 Abrams tanks to Ukraine will bring the total number of these tanks delivered to around 85 units, including the 31 Abrams tanks previously provided by the United States. If you want to learn more about the use of Abrams tanks in combat in Ukraine, we recommend checking out the article, "The First Abrams in Combat in Ukraine." Also, check out the Armored Warfare Roundup from Militarny with Mykola Salamaka, where we also discuss Abrams. The U.S. military has delivered blood by drone during the Swift Response 2025 multinational exercise held at the Pabrade training ground in Lithuania, Defense Blog reported. The operation used a TRV-150 unmanned aerial vehicle to drop a package containing medical supplies, including blood. The package was delivered using a parachute system. The goal was to demonstrate how unmanned systems can be used to provide medical support in combat environments and improve survival rates for the wounded. The use of drones to deliver blood to the front line was pioneered by Ukrainian forces. On February 21, 2025, Ukraine's 12th Azov Brigade of the National Guard reported the world's first such delivery in combat conditions. At the time, a soldier had suffered a serious shrapnel wound to the neck, causing heavy blood loss. With evacuation proving difficult and the soldier in critical condition, medics opted to deliver blood components by drone directly to the trench. This enabled on-site transfusion, increasing the soldier's chances of survival. In addition to blood, the drone also carried other essential supplies: transfusion kits, intraosseous access devices, warming agents, calcium, painkillers, and antibiotics. The soldier remained in the position for more than 10 hours before evacuation. The brigade later confirmed that his condition had been stabilized. The ability to conduct blood transfusions in combat is a significant development for Ukrainian military medicine, achieved through close cooperation between the armed forces and medical volunteers. Until 2023, Ukrainian regulations permitted blood transfusions only by licensed physicians. However, in response to battlefield needs, the Ministry of Health launched a dedicated training program in transfusion therapy. This initiative enabled combat medics to acquire the knowledge and practical skills required to safely administer transfusions in the field. As a result, trained personnel, not just professional doctors, can now perform transfusions directly on the front line or during evacuation, providing critical care before a patient reaches a stabilization point or hospital. Azov Brigade medics were among the first to incorporate transfusion procedures into combat medical training beginning as early as 2019.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Every day. We had a guy last week at 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.